Here we go.
Reimagining Star Wars.
Alright, welcome to Reimagining Star Wars with Santa, the live stream, number 4. We're super excited. And as we get in here, and Vega, would you like to say hello to everybody?
Hi, just came in the perfect timing.
And Santa, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Well, hello, everybody. It's good to be back.
It is.
So, Santa, how was your pre-Christmas preparations with Mrs. Claus?
It was good. Santa enjoyed having a weekend off and spending some time with his wife, and that was great. Thanks.
Awesome. Now all the little elves are able to take care of everything. They're not all worried about taking care of the anniversary.
We're busy at work here at the North Pole. Busy.
So, okay, so with that, let's. I think Santa will open up with. He's got 5 points that for what he thinks will lead to reconciliation, and I think that's how I'd put it. I'd let him put it how he wants to put it.
Well, I was watching a John Campea video, and somebody asked him. I guess he's done a couple now. He did one for Endgame, and they asked him to do one for The Rise of Skywalker. And the title of his was, "What are the 5 things you're most concerned about with the movie?" And he listed his 5, and I thought, well, that's a good idea. Let me list the 5 things that I'm most concerned about. And the 5 that I listed came based off of just the feedback I've gotten from talking to you and talking to other Star Wars fans. I'm a huge fan of the sequel trilogy. I loved The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. I love rewatching them. Those movies strike a chord with me really, really well. So these concerns come based off of my interaction with other fans, the fandom as a whole, and wanting us to be reconciled. So I think you put that well. It's how we might be reconciled. So my first concern, if you will, is continuity. And I put with that, Palpatine is obviously going to be our central villain, right? He's the perfect bad guy to tie in all the movies, but we need to clearly understand how he's really been controlled after the Return of the Jedi. We haven't heard or seen anything from Palpatine in the movies. Certainly, if you read some of the books, you're aware of the aftermath and some of the things like that. But for the average moviegoer, I'm afraid that it might come across similar to how Maul showed up at the end of Solo, and people were like, wait a second, the last I saw, he was cut in half and falling down a shaft, right? So we have the same sort of thing with Palpatine. The last people saw of him, for the bulk of the audience, is him blasting off electrocution and falling into a shaft. So shortly followed by explosion of the Death Star. So we really need to understand how he's been in control and how that ties this trilogy in with the whole saga as a whole. So I put that under continuity. Any thoughts before I go to point number 2?
I think that I think Palpatine has to be the perfect villain. I mean, so the thing is, like, when you're telling a story, you have to, and I've stated this before, you either have to have a constant protagonist or you have to have a constant villain. Something has to be constant. So episode 1, The Phantom Menace, is Palpatine. And so he's carried through all the way through. He's the villain.
Yeah.
And so it only makes sense that he would be the final villain in that line. Well, hey, here's the birthday boy. Hey, say hi, Santa.
Whoa! Happy birthday! Hi.
He's got a big wish list to send to you soon.
Oh yeah.
So yes, little Ren has turned 5 today. Though we're not celebrating his birthday today. We're doing a little celebration. We're our own personal celebration, but we're having a big party here. We were going to do it this weekend, but the LSU Alabama game is happening right during the middle of his party, and so that pretty much has traffic-wise has kind of killed it. So had to move it.
It's all about scheduling, right? Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I agree. I think some of the other people that have been brought up, everybody loves to bring up Plagueis. That feels, in the term that people use, is that it feels a little too inside baseball to me. You have a 10-second mention of him in the prequels, and you don't hear from him again. And I think if people were to be introduced to Plagueis at this point, they'd be like, who? Right? The fans, the people who have read and talked about Plagueis for years would certainly be happy about that. But I think for the average person to have one villain that ties everything together, you couldn't pull it from that tiny little piece that we had from the prequels and then in the last movie and make that the overarching villain. So yeah, it feels to me like Palpatine should be it, and we should understand how he has been pulling the strings in this sequel. The second one, so the first was continuity, and specifically regarding Palpatine. Second concern is also continuity, but this is about the Skywalker saga. And if the 6 movies were essentially the rise, the fall, and the redemption of Anakin Skywalker, that's clearly what the 6 movies were about. Then how does this sequel fit in with that if you don't have Anakin somehow involved in a key role? So that's my second concern, is for this to fit into the saga and for it to be really tied together. We should have a role for Anakin.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think that we've had basically. I mean, people would say that the protagonist of the first 3 was Obi-Wan, right? The second protagonist was Luke.
Yeah. And the third is Rey.
And the third is Rey. All right.
Absolutely.
And then, but Anakin has been the overall background of the story.
Yeah.
And short of the Last Jedi, it was touched on. So in the first one, we have the child Anakin all the way through. I love you too, buddy. And child Anakin all the way through to
fall, right?
To his rise and his fall, all right, and his redemption. So now, if this is part of the saga, which that's how it's been billed, there's got to be a tie-in.
That's right.
And so Rey has got to be tied to that legacy in some way. It doesn't have to be exactly the way Luke is. Luke, of course, is family, but there's got to be some sort of tie-in. I am not writing this. I do not know how they plan on doing it.
I want to kiss you.
I think Anakin has to have a role. It's just really, to me, if it's not, then I really challenge, how does this fit into the saga?
Right.
I have no problems with the sequel trilogy, and to me, and I think most people, they agree, the Force Awakens feels like a soft reboot of the franchise, but that's not how it's being kind of captured, right? It's not being framed that way. It's being framed as a continuation of the saga, and up to this point, that hasn't really felt like. If you watch the Force Awakens and the Last Jedi, other than the legacy characters appearing, there's not really a thread.
Right, I absolutely agree. I mean, I guess if I was writing this from the beginning, and I were to thread this in the way that was not just a slight, tweaking of the Force Awakens or tweaking of the Last Jedi, the tack that I would take with this trilogy would have been to, all right, so the first overall saga is Anakin, and and so that's a 6-part saga, and then I would do another 6-part saga where it's about Luke, and so I love you too, buddy. And so if I were to take the saga through, it would be about Luke, and so in the sense where we have the handoff to from Obi-Wan to Luke occurring in the under part of that, all right. In the same sense, we would have an under handoff as well, whether that is Luke handing off to somebody, whether it is Han Solo handing off to somebody. Whether that's Akira, a Rey, or something like that. That would be the underlying part of the overall saga about Luke. That's how I would have tied it together. So we're not dealing with the Palpatine Anakin arc anymore. We're dealing with the Luke arc now.
Yeah, but it's been sold as a continuation of the saga. So there's the challenge.
Right, and that would still continue it. It would just be, instead of a whole 9-part saga, it'd be 2 6-part sagas tied in the middle.
So yeah, I completely agree with that. But when this saga ends, I'm starting to have questions in my head. You know that kid from the last movie that got the broom? I think that.
Broom boy?
Yeah, the broom boy. I'm gonna start calling him the broom boy, and then I am thinking he might be part of the saga, and he will learn, probably find another Jedi or to teach him, and he will learn how to control the Force, and he'll probably be a Master Jedi.
I watched a video today that mentioned that they think the next series will be a soft reboot, and I'm like, wait a minute. I think most people think The Force Awakens was a soft reboot, so it would be weird to do another soft reboot after that. So yeah, I think the challenge that they've laid is 7 and 8 don't feel much like a continuation because, as we already mentioned, our protagonist and antagonist have been obscured, and if in the reality of it that Palpatine has been the antagonist all the time, then we need to understand that. Secondly, our protagonist, being Anakin, being that thread that goes through, all of a sudden, where did that go?
Right. There needs to be some sort of tie of Anakin to every protagonist.
Yep, exactly.
And that's the key. So we need to understand what that tie is. Now, if Rey is not the real protagonist and it's actually Ben, then that actually makes some sense. But I don't know what kind of backlash you would have if you switched that.
I still don't buy it. Like obviously the primary story in the first 6 is Anakin, and that's it. You put it really well. Like the first 3, our protagonist is Anakin right up until the middle of the 3rd movie, but or the end. And then the 2nd is Luke. The 3rd is Rey. That's clear, right? Those trilogies. But at this point, if you were going to tie them in, Anakin and Palpatine have to be that thread. They have to be.
No, I absolutely agree. That's what I was saying. I mean, I don't see it either, but I'm just saying, they did a switcheroo on us where Ben finishes out the last bit. I mean, while I might enjoy seeing that, I can't imagine the backlash that would occur from the other side.
And more than that, it's a weak tie.
I agree. I mean, like I said, I would probably enjoy seeing it from a certain point of view, but even I would start to pick it apart by the time it was done. I mean, if that makes sense.
But what if Ben? What if Ben did a triple cross?
Well, that would be crazy.
Yeah,
but it could happen. I mean, but I would definitely not see that as good storytelling.
So my first point was about our antagonist, Palpatine. The second was about the protagonist, or the primary character, being Anakin. My third concern is also continuity, and in this case, it's about the sequel trilogies. Largely, we touched on this. It's largely been about Rey and Ben, or Kylo. This really needs to end with Rey and Ben fitting in, rather than being that soft reboot that most of us feel. We need to feel like Rey and Ben somehow tie into the saga as a whole for it to be connective tissue, right? Otherwise, both of them, and that's why I say it doesn't really work for Ben to be flipped as the antagonist, because he also doesn't really tie in, other than his mom happens to be Princess Leia, but he's not really been the protagonist of the story.
Absolutely.
So in either case, Rey and Ben, Rey, Kylo, they need to have some connective tissue that ties them back all the way through the saga, and I don't know how they're going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the reason why, like, I've listened to these leaks and I've said, yeah, I no, it doesn't sound right. You know, I mean, something just seems to be missing. It is really, actually, the more I've heard the leaks, the more I have discounted them, and so like I'm going, no, you're missing an extreme amount of context. I'm not sure this is real.
Yeah,
And
well, even to the degree that the leaks could be mostly accurate, they're really, really thin. We need a lot more information. So
I agree. There's a lot of visual aspects that we're missing. I mean, you can tell me all you want, but I mean, having done a few screenplays at this point in time, and having done the storyboarding for them, you know, and even those come up short when it comes to the visuals of a movie. So it's real easy to miss significant context and emotion from just an actor, you know, pressing their lips or you know, squinting their eyes at the right moment. I mean, those things are missing, and those things matter.
Well, I think you're right, but even though they have been missing that, I think it's like a puzzle, and they're just missing the puzzle piece to finish the puzzle.
I agree with you, and I think one of my favorite theories that could tie it together very, very nicely and make Rey be part of the connective tissue is her being a clone or a bit of a laboratory creation of Palpatine, right? If Sheev had her created and she ties in as part of, we already have, like in the comic books, him being involved in Anakin's creation, him being involved in Rey's creation, gives it some of that connective tissue that ties her back in to the saga as a whole. I love that.
In that sense, it kind of makes Anakin and her siblings.
They're cousins.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, but I mean, if they both have the same father.
Well, I don't know if they have the same father, but maybe they do, right? So you're right. But if depending on whichever way they execute that, I think that to make Rey fit in really well, that's the best one, and that's the one I like the most. It keeps her being a child of nobody,
Right.
In the true sense that she didn't have a mom and a dad. She was created in a laboratory. Much like all those clones, right? They didn't truly have a mom and dad. We could say the same of Boba Fett, right? Jango is his dad, but sort of, right? He is Jango too, right?
Right.
So it's weird. So
He's Django squared.
right. So anyway, that's how I feel about that. The fourth point, I know we're kind of on time, but the fourth point. So first is continuity with our antagonist. Second is continuity with our protagonist, or main character. Third is the continuity with the new characters. Fourth is continuity, but with our legacy characters. We know several being brought back: Leia, Lando, Chewie, C-3PO, R2-D2. Right? Those are the primary legacy characters that are being carried into this last movie. If, again, this is going to be connective tissue back to the original six, they need to have some legacy role. They need to come forward in a way that's not trivial, that's not just a short clip. They need to have some pivotal role, something that adds to the story, not just their appearance.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you're hitting the points pretty good, and I think as we go forward, that if we can at least have these addressed on some sort of level, I think that. I mean, I'm not saying it'll be 100% reconciliation, but there are just some diehards that are just like, if they don't get everything they want, there's gonna be no compromise.
Right.
But I mean, there's got to be some sort of meeting in the middle. I mean, like we've joked around on the Discord. We talked about being the synthesis. You have the antithesis and the thesis, and we're being the synthesis, or we're the middlemen, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Hashtag the gray order.
right. Well, yes, and that was one of the things we were talking about. So if you don't know, both I and Santa follow the Den of Nerds, and he has announced his Great Order, and I think we've found a good compromise. I think it's pretty clear. I'm a TL, a Last Jedi hater, and he's a Last Jedi lover, and I think we both, for the most part, I like the Force Awakens, and he of course loves the Force Awakens. So where the contention comes is the Last Jedi, and so. I'm not saying that Disney's done everything perfect I think I've done plenty of stuff to kind of give cover for Kathleen Kennedy and kind of how I've seen. I may be wrong on some things, but I think there's a lot more going on in the way things have played out than we just have a political agenda. I mean, that's I think that's kind of the key of everything. So I mean, and so to make a long story short. We as a channel are going to join the Den of Nerds and the Grey Order. I mean, gray is like a forbidden word when you talk about Star Wars because it means that you use both the light and the dark. But in real life, there is an aspect of what's good and what's bad and the way you handle yourself, and you cannot be all in on something without. And not find some middle ground. I mean, you have to find middle ground when you have contention, and I think me and Santa are an example of that. I mean, when I came out, the thing that put me on YouTube was me ranting over Luke Skywalker. I mean, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that rant.
Right.
But that said, and I still have a hard time with it. But that said. I don't love everything about Star Wars. I love the idea of Star Wars, and there's so much good in even the little, even in the bad. You can, if you take it apart, a lot of times you can find some good in it, and so that is where we stand. So
I agree with you. I think we both expressed at some point today as well that Star Wars has been an important part of our lives at some point. And there's certain aspects or movies that strike a chord with us that have a great deal of nostalgia, that bring back happy thoughts of our childhood, or a comforting feeling from our childhood. And whether you like or dislike The Last Jedi, nothing detracts from that, right? Nothing detracts from what you experienced growing up with Star Wars. So. If you hate what happened in The Last Jedi, or you love it, you shouldn't be in such a state that you can't associate with one another over the things that you do like. And I think that the heart of this gray order is to say, we want to be intellectually honest. We want to be understanding that not everybody's going to see things exactly the same way, and that doesn't make them a bad person, or it doesn't give them somehow discredit their fandom. You can dislike The Last Jedi. You can hate it. You can actually hate what happened to Luke. You can dislike the new characters, but that doesn't discredit your fandom. From my perspective, you have reasons for that, and they're not necessarily lined with bigotry or sexism, right? Like, that doesn't have to come into play at all. I spent enough time talking to people to understand that that comes from earnest perspectives of who these characters are and who they meant to you growing up, and that's critical. And for me to
how you relate to them matters.
that's
That was the epiphany that we had that actually started this whole thing. Was
yeah,
we had an
and
epiphany
that
on
I
relation.
love, yeah, that I love The Last Jedi somehow doesn't make me a shill or somebody who isn't a real fan because I don't understand the characters. I relate to them differently, and for me, I love the original trilogy. And for me, I'm actually old enough that the original trilogy is the one that strikes the closest to me, and I miss it. I want it back desperately. So you can't say that I'm less of a fan because I love The Last Jedi, and I would never say that somebody who hates The Last Jedi is a lesser fan either. And I think that's where the gray order comes: is we don't take pot shots at one another, but we can be critical, and we could try to understand other points of view.
Yeah, but you still have to be careful because we get so used to operating in our little zones. Because like I've operated in the zone with a lot of people who are very negative about The Last Jedi, and so I have some typical ways of thought process and applying and expressing those things that's pretty accepted with them. And so like today I was chatting with him and I got into I did not express what I wanted to say adequately to an audience that did not have that common acceptance with the way I said it.
Yeah.
So like I talked to you that if I had broached it that conversation better to where I actually, because I was actually just trying to set up the questions I was wanting to ask, and it ended up going down this rabbit hole going toward all the economics and financials of Disney, which is not really what I wanted to go down to. I was just trying to set up the question, and so it ended up being something far more contentious than it needed to be, and eventually we pulled it back, but it was because I was communicating with people that were not in the norm with who I communicate with, and I do think that that's in this period of time that we're doing this and then we're growing, there's going to be some of that. But if we're careful and we are genuinely caring, then the answer is we will work our way through it. But if all we do is get, I mean, and that's the point. I mean, right? If we're talking to a Star Wars fan and it starts name calling, or whether it's shill or hater or whatever it might be, then what happens is that there stops the point at where you're saying, okay, let me see if I can rephrase this in a way that is really getting what I want to say across, as opposed to upsetting you. Because I'm not trying to upset you. I'm trying to pose a question. And like I said, I mean, eventually I got to it, but it took a long time for me to get to it.
Well, it got contentious, right? Yeah, I mean, you guys were towing right up to the line there for a while.
So, like, I get it that a lot of people don't like The Last Jedi. They dislike it. But what Magic Maker said, that some people find the good in, like the movie, I think.
Right. There is
like,
good in it.
Yeah, there is
even
good.
if it doesn't relate to you.
But also it's like how Luke found good in Vader.
Right. That is a good point.
That's a good point.
So if there's a chance for redemption in the most evil of the characters in Star Wars, right?
In the fandom.
And this is the example that it's trying to get over to us. So
That's right.
Can't we find redemption and a spark of good in those that love Star Wars, but maybe just see it from a different side than we do?
It's like it's also like Rey trying to find good in Ren, but also it's like the movie we dislike the most. It's
you don't dislike it. Just of the three of us, I'm the only one that dislikes the movie.
I know, but I like the movie, and the one that some people dislike the most, well the movie that people dislike, like some people dislike the most, is like Vader, and some of us who like the movie is like Luke trying to find good in it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
good.
mean, I think that's a very good insight. And
I think it is too.
Unfortunately, we spent our entire time talking about this. We didn't get to talk about resistance. So
Yeah, so there's one more point, just real quick.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we talked about the continuity in the bad guy, continuity in the good guy, the continuity in the new characters, continuity in the legacy characters, and lastly was continuity in the story arc as a whole. As we mentioned, the sequel trilogy seems like a soft reboot to this point. And if for this to tie the saga up, to put a bow on it and put it in one package together, we need to have some continuity that threads that back in.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think here's the basic thing is that, I know a lot of people love to quote Kylo Ren says, "Let the past die," as kill it if you have to, as if he was breaking the fourth wall, right? And
Right.
and so I think that that idea is just a grab at a straw to justify that this is the end. We've talked about this. Disney in no way is trying to kill their cash cow of Star Wars.
No.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
So no, go ahead. Sorry.
Like that. Like, why would they do that? Like, some of the kids, if the people's are fans, mostly they're grown-ups, I think. If their children are if their children are listening to us, they'd be surprised because, like, if they love Star Wars and they're listening to this, they'd be like shocked how
What would they be shocked at?
They'd be shocked that we're saying that Disney is trying to
kill Star Wars.
Yes.
But yet, that's exactly the headlines that we're seeing, right?
But
I mean, if that's not clickbait, I don't know what is. Because I mean, it makes. Does it make any sense to you?
it doesn't make any sense to me because I've loved watching Disney since I was.
Well, you like all the
way
Disney
younger.
stuff, and they've tried to make money on every one of those movies, right?
Yes, but
And did
Now
we buy princess costumes?
well, yeah, true.
We
When
did.
when I was younger, because I
Uh-huh.
love them.
Did we go take pictures with all the Disney princesses at Disney?
Yeah.
We did. And when The Force Awakens came out, did you dress up like Rey?
Yep, and
And
I
did we
got-
go take pictures with Kylo Ren?
yeah,
We did, didn't we?
Adrian. Oh.
Well, little Ren dressed up and took pictures with Big Ren, didn't he?
Yeah, and we also took pictures with BB-8.
That's right. We took pictures with BB-8.
And
And then the second time we went, you dressed up as a Mandalorian, didn't you?
Yes, and we actually got a subscriber for that because we saw Worker there, and they were really surprised seeing a kid in a Mandalorian costume
know.
because that's very rare to see a kid in a Mandalorian.
We got to skip the
costume.
line because of it too. Didn't
Yeah,
we?
we did, and
Santa
they
got
also
skipped
wanted
the
our
line, too.
and they also wanted our channel name, and they subscribed to it,
Yeah,
and we got another subscriber because of that.
Right, we put it all in their little official visitor book. So
That's great.
So the point of what I'm saying is that whether it's a park, whether it's a movie, whether it's a book, whether it's a video game, Disney did not buy Lucasfilm to destroy Star Wars.
Absolutely not.
And you might say, oh well, I'm not talking about really destroying it. I'm talking about they're trying to I don't know what's the word the phrase SJW, right? We're trying to social justice warrior it. Sure, maybe there's some context of trying to bring some modernity in the morals of the modern culture into the current Star Wars. Maybe there is some of that, and I won't deny that. But to say that they're going to wholesale co-opt the entirety of Star Wars with that idea simply because we did not like Holdo is ridiculous.
It is.
All right.
It is ludicrous.
I'm not trying to call y'all stupid. I'm not saying that. That's not the point I'm trying to. Because you know what? I've gotten wrapped up in that whole thought process too, and had to because it's real easy to let your hatred take you down a path that you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. There's no logic to that,
Yeah.
But it's because you hate something.
The thing is, if you bring in politics to a discussion, you can see things. You can, like, there's all kinds of examples where people went back and looked at Tolkien and applied World War II themes to it. And Tolkien said, no, I didn't do that. And you're like, well, dude, you did. So you can see those patterns because they're patterns in human history. And when you see a character like Rey, and she gets labeled as a Mary Sue because of her powers, well, you see lots of examples where there are other heroes that have plot protection, right? Like they're obviously protected and they're overpowered and things happen. So does Rey have those characteristics? Sure. But is she the perfect Mary Sue? No, not me. I mean, she's far from it. But
right. I mean, we talked about this I think we actually talked about this like in the first live stream where we talked about there's a chosen one trope, right? Well,
yeah.
And he's literally called the chosen one in the prequels, right?
Yeah. And you've got a birthday party. You've got a boy that wants his dad around this evening. So we don't want to stay on too late tonight. We'll carry on next week.
Yeah. So next week I guess we'll do all 3 episodes of Resistance, try to catch up. But the primary thing that we're going to do next week is The Mandalorian.
Absolutely.
So from our perspective, we'll have watched it on Tuesday, and we'll be coming hot in on Wednesday, and I'm sure we'll be super hyped. So my intent is to get Revan back, have Santa on with Revan. Hopefully, I'll get Jaren Coles on and Life After Phasma as well, and so hopefully we can have a little bit of a ruling council on it, and so we will move forward and rule on the first episode of The Mandalorian. The next one comes out on Friday, but we still will always keep to the Wednesday schedule. So we will be a little late. So with that, I'm going to say so long, Merry Christmas to Santa, and let Vega have the last word.
Okay, so now thinking about Disney, I'm pretty sure they don't know their Star Wars because a lot of fans don't like it. And I think that's idiotic.
All right. Well, I don't know what you said, but sometimes you're right. Some people don't know all their Star Wars. And so with that, I am just at the last word, so I'll let Santa call us out.
No, thank you very much. It's great to be back with you guys and talk some more Star Wars with Santa. I enjoyed it, and I can't wait for The Mandalorian. You guys take care. We'll see you soon.
Merry Christmas, and may the Force be with you.
Merry Christmas. May the Force be with you, and wish Ren a happy birthday.
Bye, all.